swear to God, you do that! You okay?
Your hearing loss is not service-related.
What?
War is loud. The attention given to permanent hearing loss and symptoms like tinnitus has grown increasingly throughout the last 100 years. But it's only been since the last decade or so that modern armies have taken hearing loss as seriously as they should. During World War I, hundreds of thousands of men experienced hearing loss. It was at the time the loudest war ever, something that the world had never experienced. Artillery on the Western Front could sometimes be heard from England, sounding like far-off thunder. World War I was a war of artillery, with 75% of all deaths the result of artillery fire. Undermining trenches with explosives further created unheard-of destruction. In July of 1916, at the start of the Battle of the Somme, the British exploded 60,000 pounds of ammonal explosives, creating at the time the largest man-made sound in history. The explosion was heard in London. This war was destructive to the hearing of men. However, it was also a war that saw over a tenth of soldiers losing their lives. Men further had significant psychological and physical trauma from shelling and gas, on a scale never imagined. Hearing was the least of men's worries during the war. Hearing specialists did exist at the time. Some men reported hearing-related issues, and some statistics were gathered. It's estimated at least 2.5% of all soldiers who fought in World War I experienced a disabling level of hearing loss. However, the culture of the time was for a soldier to get on with it. Many men didn't report hearing issues, and men who did report these issues were often disregarded by doctors, who at the time considered these war-related hearing losses as temporary, or even a type of hysteria. Hearing loss prevention and treatment wasn't impossible during World War I. This is an example of a World War I hearing aid, and some earplugs were available for purchase. But gun crews mostly improvised and stuffed cotton in their ears if they chose to do anything at all. Hearing aids as a form of treatment have been available in Britain as early as the 17th century. Ear trumpets, though crude and looking like something out of the Flintstones, do work. The Victorians took to many clever ways to disguise such hearing aids. Sometimes they were built into tables or even concealed into a chair. This chair has concealed resonators inside its arms. Electric hearing aids became available shortly after the invention of the telephone. Siemens, starting in 1913, made several successful electric hearing aids, about the size of a tall cigar box, with a speaker that would fit in the ear. Vacuum tube hearing aids were developed shortly after the war, the first patented by naval engineer Earl Hansen in 1920. During World War II, hearing protection wasn't a whole lot better. There were more otolaryngologists, that's ear, nose, and throat specialists, employed by military hospitals, with some even stationed on ships to see patients with ear damage. Physicians during this time used otoscopes to identify damage to the ear canal or eardrum. Doctors would also use tuning forks to determine hearing loss. Tuning forks emit tones at different frequencies, which could determine the level of hearing loss a patient was experiencing. These forks could be struck in the middle of a patient's forehead to determine if hearing loss was being experienced on one or both ears. Hearing loss was primarily treated by just telling a soldier to wait and see if it got better. A soldier might be removed from combat for complete deafness. World War II saw the first official study and recommendation for earplugs in 1944. A recommendation, but not a requirement, was made for certain soldiers like machine gun crews and tankers to wear V51R single-flange earplugs. These earplugs came in 3 different sizes, which was a revolutionary thing at the time. They remained, however, uncommon during the war. World War II noise hazards were just as bad as World War I, at sea, in the air, and on the ground. One area often overlooked was manufacturing. Rosie the Riveter was just as overlooked as soldiers in combat when it came to hearing protection. Though the use of cotton in ears was common, this technique only reduces noise by about 7 decibels. The decibels required to damage hearing is variable. Sounds 70 decibels and under can be listened to near indefinitely without any damage to the ears. Sounds over 85 decibels can damage hearing if listened to for more than 8 hours at a time, a short shift for Rosie the Riveter. As the sound increases from a level of 85, it exponentially becomes more hazardous. Decibels of 91, for example, are only safe to listen to for 2 hours. For reference, a common food blender might produce around 80 decibels, and a hairdryer around 90 decibels. An M1 Garand can produce 168 decibels when fired, a 50 caliber machine gun, 180 decibels. The firing of a 16-inch gun on a battleship is estimated as loud as 195 decibels measured 1 meter from the barrel. A single instance of noise louder than 120 decibels has the potential to damage hearing. Explosions, including those from guns, further don't just produce noise but blast pressure, an explosive shock wave. A tank's blast pressure coming from its main gun can kill a man even if they are just standing near the front of the barrel. This blast pressure, more properly called overpressure because it is relative to ambient conditions, even coming from small arms, is enough to damage ears. But as many might observe, weapon safety was still developing during World War II. One reason why artillerymen open their mouths is to help equalize pressure in and around their ears, as shockwaves propagate through the sinuses and facial bones. Shockwaves can not only rupture eardrums, but damage the brain itself, leading again to tinnitus. Damage to the ears during combat often comes from multiple sources, with each additional source compounding potential damage. Combat in an enclosed space multiplies the danger of hearing damage from both blast pressure and sound, which can bounce off walls multiple times. Hitler himself suffered from a perforated eardrum when an explosion went off inside a conference room at his Wolf's Lair headquarters. The design of World War II machines rarely, if ever, considered the hearing of the men operating them. One of the worst places to be in the war was in a B-25 bomber. The propellers spun only a few feet away from the cockpit. The engines were also uniquely arranged to direct noise directly at the cockpit. A crew could expect their entire flight to be over the 100 decibel range. So why didn't soldiers do more to protect their ears? It mostly came down to sacrificing their ears for immediate safety. Soldiers need to hear the battlefield and be able to communicate. Furthermore, soldiers in combat experience a fight or flight response, sometimes called an acute stress response. In combat, the body produces a significant amount of stress hormones that cause us to ignore pain, narrow our vision, and up our heart rate. Our hearing is also affected, which can easily cause a soldier to completely ignore the otherwise painful experience of extremely loud gunfire. Soldiers during combat can miss soft and loud audio cues. The ping from a Garand clip ejection would, for example, be easily ignored. Many soldiers after World War II would not be properly diagnosed for hearing loss. This became a problem for men as they grew older, and the effects of aging compounded their war-related hearing loss. It took until modern times, and still has a distance to go, for armies and police forces to properly understand the risks of hearing loss. Today it is estimated that at least 10% of all soldiers have hearing loss due to their service. If you want one of the best movie examples of how damaging and loud automatic gunfire can be, check out the film Heat from 1995. Currently, most armies continue to search for cost-effective ways to keep their soldiers' hearing safe, while making sure they have situational awareness on the battlefield. Earplugs are carried by most soldiers at all times, but these aren't always going to be used in combat. A soldier would still rather risk their hearing than not hearing a life-saving command. Electronic hearing protection has come a long way, and modern armies are attempting to make such equipment available to every soldier. These headsets can plug into communications and have noise-canceling technology. They can further act as ears with set thresholds for compression. External microphones can transmit audio to speakers inside the headsets, but at levels safe for the listener. It's a developing technology that will hopefully save more ears for future soldiers. Hearing loss remains an unseen disability for veterans. Many veterans still struggle with rejected hearing loss claims. Unfortunately, hearing loss can progress slowly for many during their careers and not become a major problem until years after service. Young soldiers might be hesitant to document damaging noise exposure or be unaware of the risks. Education is key without the ear screaming. You might be able to get used to screaming, but your ears can't. They will be damaged. Alright, I'm Johnny. What? Huh? Do quietly like the video or leave a comment. Take care and have a nice rest of your day.